It's Monday, January 2nd. I'm Aryeh O'Sullivan, and this is IBA News broadcasting from Jerusalem. We open with the tragedy in Jerusalem. The father whose 4 daughters and wife died in a fire in their Talpiot apartment yesterday has agreed to conduct an autopsy, but only on 2 of his eldest daughters, aged 9 and 11. Police who are treating the investigation as a murder-suicide hope the findings will shed light on how the 5 perished. IBA's Margaret Lutkevich reports.
Neighbors of the French religious family who immigrated to Israel 13 years ago were still reeling today from the horrific tragedy. Social workers and counselors were sent to the school where 2 of the sisters attended to speak to pupils and others to assist the family. According to initial findings, the mother allegedly murdered her 4 children, locking them in a room before setting the apartment on fire and hanging herself. It was late yesterday afternoon when rescuers, police and firefighters responded to a call that a fire had broken out in the 6th-floor apartment. After forcing their way inside, firefighters encountered the gruesome discovery. The bodies of the children, aged 11 years to 11 months in one of the rooms, and the body of the 36-year-old mother reportedly on the veranda. The husband, an optometrist, was not at home at the time, arriving at the scene half an hour later. He was treated at the site for shock. The bodies were taken to the El Greenberg Forensic Institute in Abu Kabir. The names of the children and the parents have not yet been released for publication. Neighbors told reporters the family behaved normally and described the mother as a caring person. One of them said she saw the mother a few days earlier playing with the children in the local park. Some unconfirmed reports said the mother was not known to social services but had been receiving psychiatric treatment, and that medication was discovered inside the apartment. Margaret Lutkevich, IBA News.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is expected to be questioned under caution by police at his Jerusalem residence this evening on suspicion of accepting valuable gifts from businessmen and breach of trust. According to local reports, police have compiled a vast amount of material relating to the allegations against Netanyahu, including testimonies from witnesses close to the Prime Minister, among them World Jewish Congress President Ron Lauder. According to the reports, some of the alleged valuable gifts were also given to members of Netanyahu's family, including his son Yair. In preparation for the arrival of the police officers, a curtain was hoisted outside the Prime Minister's residence to hide the police vehicles from view. Likud MK and Chairman of the Interior Committee, David Amsalem, today submitted a law proposal that will prevent a criminal investigation on allegations of bribes, breach of trust, and fraud of any serving Prime Minister. According to his proposal, a serving Prime Minister would not be questioned for offenses until the completion of his term. The period would not be counted against the statute of limitations, and once the Prime Minister leaves office, he will face investigation. Justifying his proposal, Amsalem said that in the past 20 years, all the serving Prime Ministers were questioned, and it had a direct impact on the governing of the country. However, even if the bill passes its 3 readings, it will not be considered retroactively and will not relieve Netanyahu from his pending investigation. Former Justice and Finance Minister Yaakov Neiman was laid to rest this afternoon at the Mount of Olives Cemetery in Jerusalem. Neiman passed away last night at the age of 77 in his home in Jerusalem. A prominent law professor turned politician, Neiman, who was not a member of the Knesset, served twice as Justice Minister and once as Finance Minister in previous governments led by Netanyahu. Despite his intentions, the Prime Minister did not attend today's funeral at the request of Neiman's family, who said they preferred to avoid all the heightened security measures necessary to facilitate Netanyahu's attendance. Eulogizing his close friend, President Reuven Rivlin described Neiman as a man of wisdom and reason, a man of advice and resourcefulness, who always knew how to listen and loved the state of Israel. Joining us now in the studio is former Minister Shimon Shitrit, a professor of law from Hebrew University. Professor Shitrit, welcome. Today, the Prime Minister is expected to be questioned by police. Do you think these new allegations will lead to anything?
First of all, I would like to say that this is a sad day. From the point of view of our public norms, it is a sad day that, again, a Prime Minister is questioned by police and in the context of criminal investigation. On the other hand, it is an indication of the strength of democracy in Israel, that no one is above the law and everyone must be subjected to investigation if necessary, according to the decision of the law enforcement agencies. Whether or not this investigation would lead to a further procedure is dependent on what we hear from the Attorney General, the legal advisor to the government, who is the one that has to make this decision. At the moment, it's a total cover over the exact nature of what is suspected of his conduct that is now investigated. So we really have to wait. The general practice, or the general practice according to the legal tradition in Israel, is that it will not influence the position of the Prime Minister unless there is a decision to press charges against him. Until that time, and that was the case all over in the past, until that time he is continuing to serve in his position without any impact, with the exception of the public controversy.
Well, Professor, Prime Minister has said repeatedly that there's nothing because there is nothing. And he says that this is a sort of like the systematic attempt by the media to discredit him and his family. Do you think there's anything to that?
I think it is clear from our point of view that if the police convince the Attorney General that there is a justification to question officially the Prime Minister, it is a statement there is nothing. It is a statement for the public consumption rather than reflecting the true situation. The true situation is that there is something to be investigated, and therefore it is difficult to accept a statement that the whole process is empty, so to speak, of nothing.
We heard that MK Amsalem is going to propose a bill that would prevent the Prime Minister from being indicted. Does this, while he's in office, do you think this threatens democracy, this kind of bill?
It does exist, for example, in France. In France, no criminal investigation can be conducted against the president or the head of state of France. And there are probably other countries that follow the same practice. With us, it has not been accepted. Maybe there is a room to consider it, exactly because every prime minister was under investigation. And that means that the criminalization of the political process calls for some review.
Today we have former Justice Minister and Finance Minister Yaakov Neiman laid to rest. What do you think his legacy was for Israel, and how did he leave his mark?
The legacy of Justice Minister Yaakov Neiman was of a man who conducted his life in two tracks: the professional track as a lawyer and the public track as a minister and advisor to almost all prime ministers. For example, he was part of the orchestration or planning of the clemency to the bus 300 a few years ago. He was part of the effort to bring back the three kidnapped soldiers. Turned out that they were killed in the process in Har Dov, in Dov Mountain. And he was a man of philanthropy. He was a giver, in addition to being a public figure and a lawyer. And so his legacy is a person that, at the same time, was a professional, and he assumed political office not because he was a member of a party. He didn't have any party behind him, but he served a number of governments. So I would say he is an exemplary professional who contributed to society, both in terms of contributing to the weak people, the weak sectors, and also to the general community in terms of public service. I personally was a good friend of his, and I followed him as a clerk to Justice Whitcomb, the Supreme Court of Israel, and then we had a good relationship. We actually together, in fact, drafted the coalition agreement of 2009
really?
between Likud and Labour. So on the whole, I consider him a very important figure in terms of legal figure and political figure.
He will be missed. Professor Shimon Shitrit of Hebrew University of Jerusalem, thanks for joining IBA. ISIS has claimed responsibility for Saturday's deadly attack in Istanbul, in which 39 partygoers were killed and over 70 injured while ringing in the new year at a popular nightclub. Turkish authorities have arrested 8 people suspected of involvement in the attack, while the main terrorist remains at large. Tomorrow at 11, 19-year-old Ilian Nasser, an Israeli who was killed in the attack, will be laid to rest in her hometown of Tira. Reporter Sam Sokol has the latest.
Turkish authorities released the first video footage of the attacker on Sunday, showing a man clad in dark clothing and carrying a Kalashnikov assault rifle enter the club, guns blazing. In the video, the gunman, who Turkish authorities say is still at large, did not appear to be dressed as Santa Claus as initially reported. In the meantime, Israeli victims of the attack returned home last night with the arrival of 18-year-old Rawa Mansour, who was shot in the hand and leg and was taken to Meir Hospital in Kfar Saba for treatment. Mansour, who said she was very happy to be back in Israel, was one of 4 women from the Israeli Arab village of Tira who were at the club during the shooting. Meanwhile, the body of 19-year-old Lian Zaher Nasser, the only Israeli to die in the attack, is expected to be returned to Israel for burial during the day. The Zaka organization was brought on board by the government to facilitate the return of Nasser's remains. Nasser's father, speaking to reporters from his home in Tira, recalled warning his daughter about the potential dangers of her trip. "I told her the security situation isn't good and that it's very dangerous, but she insisted on going because her friends wanted to go as a group," he said. In interviews with Israeli media, Nasser said that he had received several photos from his daughter earlier in the evening. Saturday's attack came only weeks after 12 people were killed in an attack on a Christmas market in Berlin, and is reminiscent of a similar attack last year on Paris's Bataclan concert hall, also claimed by Islamic State. Reuters reported that several days ago a pro-Islamic State group had called for lone wolf attacks on celebrations, gatherings, and clubs.
The bodies of Hamas terrorists killed while perpetrating attacks in Israel will no longer be returned to their families, but rather will be buried in Israel instead. This according to a new decision announced by the Security Cabinet, which aims to pressure Hamas to return the bodies of IDF soldiers Oren Shaul and Hadar Golden, who were killed in the 2014 war in Gaza, as well as 2 other Israeli citizens, Abraham Mengistu and Juma Abu Aninima, who crossed into Gaza on their own and are believed to be held by Hamas. The Sunday Security Cabinet decision comes one day after the Hamas military wing released videos of a mock birthday for Oren Shaul. A statement released by the Prime Minister's office said the ministers unanimously adopted a plan of action. However, further details were not disclosed. The Knesset's Ethics Committee today decided to bar MK Basel Ghatas from all parliamentary activity for 6 months. Ghatas, a member of the Joint List, is currently under house arrest after being questioned by the police 433 Lahav fraud unit on suspicion of smuggling mobile phones to a Palestinian security prisoners incarcerated in Israel. At the time, Ghatas has accused the police of launching a witch hunt. According to the committee's decision, Ghatas will not be permitted to speak at Knesset committees, deliver speeches at the plenum, or submit proposals for bills, but will still, however, be entitled to vote. Ghatas blasted the decision, calling it a political revenge, saying never before have such measures been taken against any serving MK before a police investigation was finished. Ghatas says he intends to appeal the decision in the High Court of Justice. Further responding to the UN Security Council vote against Israeli settlements in the West Bank, Habayit HaYehudi Chairman Naftali Bennett is proposing a bill for the annexation of Ma'ale Adumim to Israel. Bennett, who serves as Minister of Education, said he expects to present the bill by the end of the month. This morning, Haaretz newspaper quoted Regional Cooperation Minister Tzachi Hanegbi saying that unilaterally annexing parts of the West Bank would be a disaster and would undoubtedly be opposed by his Likud party. The issue is one of the most divisive in the coalition and could see the Prime Minister acting to prevent it before it comes to a vote in order to avoid international reaction. Meanwhile, Israel Television's Mabat News program has revealed that a post-annexation plan would see 10,000 housing units built in the controversial E1 area and construction of a bypass road for Palestinians, by so making the main highway exclusive Israeli use. The plan also includes the opening of a tourist park with a hotel and amusement center in the area. Meanwhile, the decision by the UN Security Council against Israeli settlement buildings continues to raise the hackles of many Israeli supporters who gathered over the weekend in New York to protest the move. Demonstrators lashed out against U.S. support for the United Nations and its refusal to veto anti-Israeli resolutions. They also expressed optimism that President-elect Donald Trump would be more supportive of Israel and move the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem.
Shocked and horrified that Obama chose not to use the veto power of the U.S. to protect our closest friend, our best ally in the Middle East. He violated tradition, and the idea of claiming that the Kotel and Har HaBayit are occupied Palestinian territory, and it's illegal for Jews to be there. It's illegal for Jews to live in any part of their capital. There's no other country whose capital is disputed or other nations are allowed to say what the capital of the country is. And we're horrified that Obama decided to do this because he should have vetoed this horrific resolution.
We want America to withhold funding from the United Nations. It's made up of thieves, murderers. It's a group of non-democratic countries. They have the majority. It's not an institution that the United States should be part of. So we're asking for a complete defunding of from the United States for the UN. But I have to tell you, we came here with another message, and that message is for the people of Israel, that take heart, be strong, because Donald J. Trump is going to be coming as president on January 20th, and the world is going to change.
Stock talk now, and shares were up in the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange while there was no change yet in the shekel rate. Turning to the weather, and it will continue to be partly cloudy with light rain in the north and along the coast. Temperatures will drop. Here are the expected highs and lows at home and abroad for the next 24 hours. That's all for today. Please join us again tomorrow when Laura Cornfield will be at this desk to bring you the latest news from Israel. Until then, I'm Ariel O'Sullivan wishing you a good evening and shalom from Jerusalem.